Hey y'all, so today we're going to get back into chapter 8 and we're going to discuss the trap number 5, which is called trying to sneak a secret life split in two. So this one I went into really curious because I feel like this is what a lot of narcissists do, and I'm always mindful that even though it's never my intention to try to understand why they do what they do, because I feel like that's just a rabbit hole that's fruitless really, and you can't really ever get to the bottom of it. There's a lot of speculation, and I feel like we've already spent enough time entangled with these people. So anyway, that's never my intention, but as we're running across different material and studying it, sometimes it will seem to shine a light on on that kind of thing, like narcissist behavior. And so I just want to encourage you that if you start to have any kind of mental processes where you're thinking along those lines, like, I wonder if this explains why so-and-so treated me the way they did or whatever, just don't make excuses. That's my encouragement to you, not to make excuses ever for someone's poor treatment of you. Even if you were to somehow find out, like maybe they had an abusive childhood or, whatever. There's people who have also had abusive childhoods who didn't turn out to abuse others. You know what I'm saying? So it always comes down to choice. Just please keep that in mind, because I do. I never let myself fall into making excuses or feeling sorry for them. I know it's a choice, the way that we all treat one another, So that being said, once I got into reading all this, I thought, okay, I'm not really able to relate to this much, other than the fact that sometimes if you're caught up in a narcissistic entanglement, it sucks so much life out of you and requires so much of your attention and your energy and your time. It ties you up and keeps you from investing that same energy and time and attention in what matters to you. So in that regard, I can kind of understand, or I can relate rather, but let's dive into it. Again, trap number 5 is called trying to sneak a secret life split in two. So she opens this by talking about, she says, in this segment of the tale, the child is to be confirmed and is taken to the shoemaker for new shoes. The confirmation motif is a relatively modern addition to the story. And she talks about archetypally, the red shoes is kind of like she says, calls it an overlaid fragment of a far older story or myth about the onset of monarchy. And she starts discussing young women being taught awareness and response to the outer world by their female elders, and she gets into the different rites, R-I-T-E, rites throughout different cultures and through history. She mentions like India and Egypt, Asia and Turkey, and her point here, she gets into menstruation and delivering children and things like that, and the symbolism of blood. And I think her point here is just the theme of creation, because she jumps into this other section, and at first it didn't really make a transition for me, but I think that's what it is. I think she's just kind of easing us into the theme of creation, because she alludes to that being the main thing that's really suppressed. And again, that can look so many different ways. It can, be like self-expression. So like the girl in the story, I would say that the suppression of creation in her situation with the harsh, rigid old lady that adopted her is really a suppression of her self-expression. You know what I'm saying? So creation can look a lot of different ways. And So I just want us to keep that in mind. It says, now in the tale occurs one of the most revealing episodes of psychic repression. The child's voracious desire for soul ruptures the battens of her dried out behaviors. At the shoemaker's, she sneaks the strange red shoes past the old woman. Excuse me. A ravening hunger for the soul life has rushed to the surface of the psyche, taking whatever it can lay its hands on, for it knows it will soon be repressed again. This explosive psychological sneaking occurs when a woman suppresses large parts of self into the shadows of the psyche. In the view of analytical psychology, the repression of both negative and positive instincts, urges, and feelings into the unconscious causes them to inhabit a shadow realm. While the ego and superego attempt to continue to censor the shadow impulses, the very pressure that repression causes is rather like a bubble in the sidewall of a tire. Eventually, as the tire revolves and heats up, the pressure behind the bubble intensifies, causing it to explode outward, releasing all the inner content. So she's talking about getting into the shadow self. What constitutes a shadow self? What kind of things, could go or be pushed into that shadow part of our psyche? And this has always been a really interesting concept to me, but I've never taken the time to really learn about the shadow concept in the psyche. So I wish I could offer you more explanation here, but I'm just going to share with you my thoughts, and hopefully it'll spur thoughts of your own that will benefit you. But a narcissist, their whole point is that we go along with their agenda, whatever it is, because ultimately it's self-serving. And I think that sometimes that can mean, like I said, first of all, one thing is your attention and your time, and so that's pulling that resource away from you. And so the things that you would be doing with your energy and your time would be what would get repressed or suppressed. You know what I mean? So like they may not want you spending time with your family, because they may be afraid, this is all hypothetical, they may be afraid that your family is on to them, and that if you spend time with your family, you may be influenced and wake up and realize what's going on and leave the relationship. So you may feel like you have to sneak that time to visit with your family when they're at work or not around or whatever. You see what I'm saying? This is just an example. They can control so many aspects of your life, including your behaviors, wanting you to be a certain way, act a certain way. Sometimes it may be they might want you to dress a certain way or not dress a certain way, or there's so many different ways they can control you for various manipulations they have going on. So I think anytime you have those restraints placed on you is when things can get, I think the word is relegated, another word to look up, relegated to your shadow part of your psyche. So just my thoughts on that. It doesn't mean you're a bad person and you have things to hide, but with this person this narcissist who is unreasonable, with a normal person, you wouldn't have to do these kind of things. You wouldn't have to sneak around to visit with your family, for example. You know what I mean? Or you wouldn't have to go along with, some kind of fake flattering behavior they want you to join in on. You could just be yourself and normal, because that's well enough, and that'd probably close a business deal right there. So it's kind of like you're not a bad person, but you're made to believe you're inferior or you're subpar or bad or wrong. You're made to believe those things, and that's part of the manipulation too. So just a lot to think about. So she mentions like the Scrooge character. She says the shadow, the way it works, that a Scrooge-like person may amaze everyone and suddenly give millions of dollars to an orphan's home. And then she says, or The shadow aspect may be why a normally sweet person is capable of throwing a fit. So it's kind of like it can work both ways, you know. That tire blowout that she just referenced. So she says, though the values may change from culture to culture, thereby positing different negatives and positives in the shadow. Typical impulses that are considered negative and therefore relegated to the shadowlands are those that encourage a person to steal, cheat, murder, act excessively in various ways, and so forth in that vein. And she says the shadow also, however, can contain the divine, the luscious, beautiful, and powerful aspects of personhood. So this secondary piece here is what I feel like happens when you are entangled with a narcissist. You have to tuck away those natural good aspects of yourself, because it may expose them. It may expose their manipulations, or you're just not going along with their agenda in that way. It says, these discarded, devalued, and unacceptable aspects of soul and self do not just lie there in the dark, but rather conspire about how and when they shall make a break for freedom. They burble down there in the unconscious. They seethe, they boil, till one day, no matter how well the lid over them is sealed, they explode outward and upward in an unchanneled torrent and with a will of their own. Which kind of makes me, I had a thought about addictions. I wonder if that may be one cause of addictions. If someone just feels, like they have to live with some part of themselves repressed, and it's so painful that they cover it up with addictions. Just something to think about. It says the shadow life occurs when writers, painters, dancers, mothers, seekers, mystics, students, or journey women stop writing, painting, dancing, mothering, looking, peering, learning, practicing. They might stop because whatever they just spent long with did not come out the way they had hoped, or did not receive the recognition it deserved, or countless other reasons. When the maker stops for whatever reason, the energy that naturally flows to her is diverted underground, where it surfaces whenever and wherever it can. Because a woman feels she cannot in daylight go full bore at whatever it is she wants, she begins to lead a strange double life, pretending one thing in daylight hours, acting another way when she gets a chance. She says you can call it anything you like, but sneaking a life because the real one is not given room enough to thrive is hard on women's vitality. And so she talks about sneaking different things. They sneak time away from their mates and families. They sneak a treasure into the house. They sneak their writing time, their thinking time. Actually being able to reason for yourself without, a narcissist trying to override your thoughts, right? And pressure you to agree to something or think their way. It can even come down to that, just having to sneak time away just to have your own grasp on reality and your own thought processes without influence. It can even come down to that. And that's something that right there is something I feel like people just largely are not going to understand unless they have been entangled with a narcissist. But yet, if you meet someone who has been in that situation, they're like, yeah, I get it, It says to detour off this polarized path, a woman has to surrender the pretense. Sneaking a counterfeit soul life never works. It always blows out the sidewall when you're least expecting it. Then it's misery all around. It's better to get up, stand up, no matter how homemade your platform, and live the most you can, the best you can, and forego the sneaking of counterfeits. Hold out for what has real meaning and help for you. Yes. It's not worth it to stay in a soul-sucking environment that is only tailored to benefit one person, and that person isn't you. That's not a way to live, And no amount of material things are worth staying for. They're just not. What is it? There's a saying, what is it for a man to gain the world but lose his soul, or something like that? Exactly. No amount of pretty, expensive, top of the line leather red shoes are going to replace the handmade red shoes. There's no substitute for the real thing that's placed in here by our Creator. You, your soul, your spirit. There's no substitute. And so it says, in the tale, the child ducks the shoes past the old woman with failing eyesight. Here it is affirmed that the dry and perfectionistic value system itself is devoid of the ability to see closely, to be alert to what is going on all around. It is typical of the injured inner psyche and culture as well to not notice the personal distress of the self. So the young girl makes one more rotten choice in a long line of several. Let us surmise that her first step to entrapment, entering the gilded carriage, was made out of ignorance. Let us say, letting go of her own handiwork was thoughtless, but typical of those who are inexperienced at life. But now she wants those shoes in the shoemaker's case. And paradoxically, that impulse toward new life is right and proper. But she has spent too much time at the old woman's, and her instincts do not cry out in alarm as she chooses this deadly potential. In fact, the shoemaker conspires with the child. This is interesting. He winks and smiles about her poor choice. It makes you think about friends and people that you know that you feel like are for you and really they're not, and they may be trying to encourage you and influence you down the wrong path during this very critical and vulnerable time in your life when you're exiting these narcissistic entanglements. So you have to be real careful that you're not influenced in the wrong way. It says, together they sneak the red shoes by. Women trick themselves this way. They've thrown away the treasure, whatever it might be, but they're sneaking bits and pieces any way they can. Are they writing? Yes, but secretly, so they have no support, no feedback. The student, is she going for her edge? Yes, but secretly so, that she can have no help and no mentor. What about the ambitious woman who is pretending to not be ambitious, but who is heartfelt toward accomplishments for herself, her people, her world? She is a powerful dreamer, yet consigns herself to struggle forward in silence. It is deadly to be without a confidant, without a guide, without even a tiny cheering session. That's why it's so important, you know, even though you want to be reserved for a period, you know, in that hermit mode, when you're fresh out of these entanglements, but you don't want to be so isolated that you have no one. And sometimes, you know, you don't have anyone in your physical, immediate, local reality. Thank goodness for the internet, you know, that can connect us with beautiful souls, and that can align with us and who understand what we're going through and help us through. So it says, it is difficult to sneak little shreds of life this way, but women do it every day. When a woman feels compelled to sneak life, she is in minimal subsistence mode. She sneaks life away from the hearing of them, whoever the them is in her life. She acts disinterested and calm on the surface. But whenever there is a crack of light, her starved self leaps out, runs for the nearest life form, lights up, kicks back, charges madly, dances herself silly, exhausts herself, then tries to creep back to the black cell before anyone notices she is gone. And I would say sometimes this has to happen for a period until arrangements are made where, you know, you can have a safe exit, and that's understandable. It says women with poor marriages do this. Women made to feel inferior do this. Women filled with shame. Women fearing punishment, ridicule, or humiliation do this. instinct-injured women do this. Sneaking is good for a captured woman only if she sneaks the right thing, only if that thing leads her to liberation. Because that's the end goal. In essence, sneaking good and feeling and brave pieces of life causes the soul to be even more determined that the sneaking stop and that it be free to lead life out in the open as it sees fit. That should always be the goal. You see, there is something in the wild soul that will not let us subsist forever on piecemeal intake. Yes. And so, so it says the shoemaker, and this is a really interesting part here. The shoemaker in the tale foreshadows the old soldier. Remember the soldier standing at the door of the church? Who brings the dance yourself crazy shoes to life later in the story. There are too many coincidences between this character and what we know of ancient symbolism to think he is just an innocent bystander. The natural predator within the psyche and that of the culture as well is a shape changer, a force that is able to disguise itself. Just as traps, cages, and poison bait are disguised in order to lure the unaware. We must take into account that he makes a joke out of tricking the old woman. So, you know, I've heard people talk about the spiritual warfare that becomes apparent if you believe in a spiritual reality. Never trying to push my beliefs on anybody. I'm just sharing, you know, through my lens. So you're welcome to adjust to, you know, your change out your lens. I'm thinking of photography back when I used to do that, changing out lenses. But you're obviously welcome to change that out. But just to make a point here, you know, a lot of people reference the spiritual warfare that becomes super apparent when you're involved with a narcissist. And it does feel sometimes like the spirit of narcissism can jump from like one person to another, or is present in multiple people in your life, and it's almost like working against you at times as you're making progress on your spiritual journey, strengthening yourself and gaining wisdom and discernment. And so I found that really interesting that she touched on that right here. So she says, no, it is likely that he being the shoemaker, is in league with the soldier, who of course is a depiction of the devil in disguise. In olden times, the devil, the soldier, the shoemaker, the hunchback, and others were images used to portray the negative forces in both earth nature and human nature. It's a whole nother rabbit hole you could go down and research, you know. While we could rightfully be proud of the soul brave enough to try to sneak a something and anything under such drought conditions, the fact remains that alone cannot be the sole issue. A whole psychology has to include not only body, mind, and spirit, but also equally culture and environment. And in this light, it must be asked at each level how it came to be that any individual woman feels she has to cringe, flinch, grovel, and plead for a life that is her own to begin with. Inquiring into the pressures created by each layer of the inner and outer worlds will preclude a woman from thinking that sneaking the devil's shoes is any constructive choice at all. And so I can relate to this here. I wrote tolerating poor treatment, you know, like, you know, what the question is, it says it must be asked at each level how it came to be that any individual woman feels like how did it come to be that, you know, someone feels like they have to sneak good aspects of themselves, you know, or hide good aspects of themselves, well-meaning aspects of themselves, your personality, genuine good parts of you. That in itself, I think even like early on when you're just awakening to what's going on in a toxic situation, that in itself, the fact that you're having to do this with one person or in one environment, like a job environment or something, ought to be the only red flag you need. even if you don't understand anything else, because you know, it doesn't take a whole lot of living to have enough experiences with other people and environments and situations to know that, you know, you're okay and accepted the way you are, with other people and in other situations and environments. So if you ever find yourself in an ugly duckling situation, the problem isn't you. The problem is just that, you know, you may be a swan amongst ducks. And that's just a really nice way to put it, isn't it? But you see again how the darkness uses any doorways to sneak in and, you know, have us self-convict and feel bad about just who we are, even though it doesn't even make sense. And it's not to say that we're perfect. We're not. Keeping, you know, keeping an amount of humility is super important. And because we're never going to be perfect, we're always going to be what I like to call perfectly imperfect, which is the grand design, so that we can live in conjunction with the higher guiding force, you know, God. That's by design. And also with, you know, I think it's of course you can be happy and whole alone, but I think part of the design is the masculine and feminine, you know, in a partner. And so it's all about design. And you know, to be shamed, it's really projection. These narcissists, again, you serve as a mirror to them when you're just being your true self. When you're standing right next to them, you're with them, that's just going to make it all the more obvious that they're not being their true self, that they are hiding things, you know. Because their whole life is a lie. They're living a lie in every aspect. So, I didn't think this would be that long, but I think we've come up on our typical 30 minutes or around about, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. The next trap is called Cringing Before the Collective, Shadow Rebellion. So this should be really interesting. And I just thank you guys for coming along. I hope you got something out of it, and I hope you have a beautiful day. I'll see you soon.